As well. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for joining me. And thank you again for agreeing to present to everyone today. It sounds like there's going to be some really useful information to present. And without further ado, I'll stop sharing the screen and let you introduce a bit of your background and dive into your presentation, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Cheers for that. So, yes, first and foremost, thanks very much for the invite to present. I listened last year. It was great to listen to Phil and Dawn. Can't believe it was a year ago last year. So it's great to be here and to present. Yeah, my name is Chris Rosimus, and I am the lead nutritionist for the Football Association. I've been there for 3.5 years now. Prior to that, I spent 6 years with the English cricket team, working with the men's team and the women's team as part of my role with the EIS. And I've been a consultant in football with Leicester City between 2014 and 2017 before joining the FA. So that's a very brief introduction to my background. But today I'm specifically going to talk about my role really in the last 3 years supporting the senior women's team. And I'm going to specifically talk about the nutrition work we did before and during the 2019 World Cup and the journey really that we went on to get to a point of trying to apply something impactful. So I'm really excited to share this because I've just moved on from the women's team. I'm now looking after the men's pathway specifically. So this is a really nice chance to tie it all together for me and talk about, I guess, some of the highlights of the journey that I've been on.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. And feel free to share screens whenever you're ready, and I'll hand over to Fully. And thank you for that. It was great to hear your background, and not a bad time to be at Leicester City as well during the infamous stages of that career.
Yeah, it was great. As a football fan myself, it was a dream come true to be part of that. So yeah, great memories there.
No worries. And we look forward to hearing about the England women's stuff. So away you go.
Okay. Okay, so I can assume that you can all see my screen. So I'm going to talk, as I alluded to, I'm going to talk specifically today about my my journey with the England women's team, specifically in the build-up to the 2019 World Cup. And I framed this talk as a case study around the endurance event because we approached that World Cup with the analogy that it's an endurance event. We want to perform for 7 games. If we win 7 games, we'll win the tournament. And each game is a stage in an endurance event. So we used that and we worked backwards from that and figured out how it's best to fuel it. So that's where that comes from. Before I delve into the detail, this is just the context of what we're trying to achieve from our nutrition department as a whole. So the nutrition section of the department that I lead, what we're trying to achieve is that we want all our players to kind of fuel and recover effectively from the demands of international football. That's what we're trying to achieve ultimately. And it's our ambition to be the most nutritionally prepared nation in the world. So for us to achieve that, we need to have the most nutritionally prepared teams. And to achieve that, we need to have the most nutritionally prepared individuals. And that drives all of our work, whether it's with a 15-year-old in the pathway or a senior player. And to help us achieve that further, we've narrowed our focus around what we believe are the 3 most important days in an international window, if you like. And that's match day -1, match day, and match day +1. And today, I'm specifically going to talk about nutrition around match day -1 and match day from a very applied point of view with the team. This slide, I've put this slide in because this demonstrates the journey that I've been on with the team since I started working with them. I joined the FA in 2017, and apart from leading the department, my primary delivery role was with the senior women's team. And if you go back to the scale on your left-hand side, I inherited what I described at the time as a generic nutrition service that lacked performance. That's how I viewed it in my analysis. There was some good stuff going on, but I felt it needed a real performance steer. So we brought in very basic nutrition education because I felt there was a lack of it. And we, in 2018, decided we're just going to steer the players towards better fueling around different days. So we brought in a very simple concept called food formations, which visually described when the players should eat more carbohydrate, less protein, and vice versa. And that was the first start to try and bring some performance nutrition language into the environment. And She Believes 2019 was a big moment for us. Not only did we do quite well at that tournament, it was when we introduced energy gels. And that might seem as a really basic intervention in sports nutrition, but the team at that time didn't really, how I understood it, grasp performance nutrition from a carbohydrate point of view. And gels were something that were not used, unvalued, and not taken routinely by the players. So my objective at She Believes was actually to get them to understand the benefit of an energy gel, i.e. 30 grams of carbohydrate, and when best to use it. So we brought simple things in around you having an energy gel at halftime, and this is the reason why. Very basic, very simple, but I was trying to bring nutrition into their language and into their environment. And once we kind of put some education building blocks in between all of that, which I'm not talking about specifically today, we then were able to implement a World Cup deliberate gel strategy, which I'll go into detail at the moment, to help us guarantee fuel, to fuel the endurance event 7 times in a tournament. And then to really progress and build into individual fuel planning before that World Cup to make sure our players are starting games with a full tank of glycogen, which we know from the literature correlates with better performance. We did that because that wasn't happening with the team. So I'm going to talk specifically about those 2 elements and how we did that. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about where we're at now. So we've gone from a generic performance nutrition service in 2017-18 to building up some deliberate performance strategies to now where we've actually just completed, or 12 months ago, we completed some really cutting edge research with the team using gold standard energy expenditure methods in double label water to really quantify the energy expenditure of our senior players during an international camp. And I'm just going to share with you a brief insight into that unpublished data. But it couldn't be further away from where we started, from generic to highly individual support, which is where we want to get to. Pick, train, play. So brief introduction to what this is, because this underpins what I'm going to talk about. This is our departmental philosophy. So our departmental leader, Bryce Kavanagh, brought in this philosophy of pick, train, play. And there's elements of our service that fit in either the pick, who you want, window, train, how you need, or play as required. And nutrition fits under the play element of the philosophy. So now, without further kind of ado, I'm going to talk about this play intervention and how we implemented this strategy at the 2019 World Cup. So why did we do this? First and foremost, we identified that match day fuel as a key determinant of performance during this World Cup. 7 games needs high quality fuel to excel. In our kind of analysis of the team, players are habitually consuming a low carbohydrate diet. So straight away, that was something that we wanted to address. The technical staff at that particular time were embracing change in this area. So we mapped out and planned a very deliberate intervention. And we trialled it before the World Cup and executed it during the tournament successfully. So the plan. So the background then. So the reason we did it, we wanted to treat 90 minutes plus extra time as an endurance event, 120 minutes an endurance event. So once we looked at it like that, we thought, how do we fuel an endurance event then? What's building blocks need to go in place? And we looked at that. We wanted to make sure each player started the game with optimal glycogen stores. So we went straight back to the drawing board. And can we confidently say players are fueling adequately the day before a game? So let's explore that and do something about it. Because we wanted to make sure that players were fully fueled to maintain performance in the latter stages of games, particularly at the business end of tournaments, because that's when it's fatigue can make or break, I guess, performance. So the technical detail that underpinned the strategies, we looked at the literature and we felt that we wanted the players to get as close to 6 grams per kilo of carbohydrate per kilo of body weight consumed on match day -1, which is, I guess, conservative based on the literature, but a huge step forward in where the players were. A KPI was that all players will be provided with match day -1 fuel plan, You might wonder, is that not common practice? It wasn't at the time. We identified that 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate is required every 30 minutes between the end of warm-up and the end of extra time to make sure there's consistent carbohydrate availability during the period of performance. So we mapped out a fuel plan, similar how you would see a marathon where there's fueling stations every 5K, for example. We mapped out our fuel strategy for our endurance event, which is at 120 minutes. We then practiced this strategy during training to get confidence and buy-in to the process. We then practiced this, could be effective during performance. So we executed this during friendly games, and then we actually executed the plan during the World Cup. I'm going to talk you through that process now. Before we go there, I'll touch upon this. This is a big area. It seems, again, incredibly basic. And I think the term carb loading was, I guess, slightly misunderstood by the players. So we did lots of education with the team around actually what does it take to fuel adequately the day before a game. What does that look like for individuals? So the generic idea around you have 3 portions of carbohydrate every meal the day before a game, and you see traffic light systems, today's a high fuel day. Does that actually translate into what they're putting on the plate? We didn't believe it was. So we worked with the players and we put together very simple but very evidence-based fuel plans for every player. So we gave the player the education. We talked to them about glycogen, how it depletes during 90 minutes, looked at some of the studies from male research, which I'll talk on later. And we shown the players actually what it would look like for them. They were trying to baseline where they were at. So we worked with each player, gave them a fuel plan, showed them what their target is. And to bring context to that, we put together these, you see these chalkboards in the bottom left. Every carbohydrate that was on our menu on match day -1 would quantify the carbohydrate content of that particular item, but a basic little chalkboard around it, very, very simple. So then the players then could go and select their meal with more knowledge to get closer to their carbohydrate targets. And that was a process that went through. An area, I put this slide in because it's important. We put this education in place around actually making carbohydrate digestible. Now, some of the players had never consumed the level of carbohydrate that we wanted them to. So building them up to this took a bit of time. And one of the areas I talked to the players about was making that carbohydrate digestible and avoiding high protein diets. And I've put this in because quite clearly from the research that we've done recently when we analysed the players' fueling strategies, this is something that we didn't really educate the players well enough on. And I've put this in as a retrospective reflection because this was a really an important area that we touched upon but didn't educate very well on. And it was something to reflect on, I'll talk about later. But that was the basic matchday -1 fueling plan. We practiced that on every single camp. And we got to the point where the players were starting to eat more carbohydrate. So we were confident more fuel was going in. We weren't actually sure how much fuel was going in exactly until we analysed it recently, which I'll touch on at the end of the presentation. So the deliberate gel strategy then, our fueling map. So like you say, we looked at marathons and every 5K there's a fuel station. This was our fueling map, our endurance map. So we identified we wanted to take in 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate every 30 to 60 minutes. So we looked at that 120 minutes, broke it down. And we identified after the warm-up is a key time to take in 20 to 30 grams of carbohydrate to restock what they've just used during that period. As soon as we'd walk off the pitch for half time, they would take a gel. This 60 to 70 minute was a key area that we felt was really important to deliver fuel. And that was a big part of our planning. How we're going to deliver that above and beyond the physio with gels in the bag. How can we give the players access to this really important fuel around about that 60 to 70 minute mark? And that was a big part of our planning. If the game was to go into extra time, as soon as they would finish the game, they would take a gel. And if the game would go into penalties, they would take a gel. And we explained this to the players, show them the benefits. We practiced it in training. And this was the plan that we looked to execute. This was the first stage. Like I said, the uptake on gels previously wasn't great. And we identified that the basic around gels was the flavour. They didn't particularly like the gels we were giving them. So we worked with Science in Sport to come up to get a better flavour. and look at their product range. And the players, first and foremost, really liked fruit salad. So if I've got a gel that they like, but what we were trying to look at was, can we, during a game of football, give players better access to fuel so they can autonomously take fuel when they want it, particularly in that latter stage of the game? So as you can see in this picture, the right-hand side, in training, we kind of presented the idea to the technical team, the coaches, about what we're trying to achieve, and there was buy-in. So we looked at, okay, we need a training session where the players are going to perform in relatively high intensity session. At a point in the game, can we kind of simulate a stop in the game? The players can go off, take a gel, and let's see how much disruption that would cause in a game of football. So can we apply it? Will it disrupt too much? And actually, can the players tolerate taking a gel on, then going back into a high intensity session? So identify the right particular session, put these gels all around the pitch. This is just a snapshot of the touchline. And I've actually got a video. This was me on the side of the pitch, filming the actual moment when the players would break out and take the gel. So just to set the scene, around this pitch here, we've got carbohydrate gels every 4 meters. And Phil in the middle and his assistant coach at the time, Bev, they would blow the whistle and they would shout to the players gels. The players would then split off and take the fuel. So if you listen carefully, hopefully you can hear it. I'll just play the video.
Gel, Phil. Gel.
I just coaches do that. Fruit salad. These are nice, these ones.
18 seconds to get back on.
Yeah, Jill.
Still here.
It's all right.
So as you can see, we were able to kind of prove to the players and the staff that a deliberate break in the game, the players would be able to go and run off and get access to these gels around the pitch. So from that point of view, I was really confident then that actually this could be applied in a game. So the next stage was, in our kind of prep phase, we had 3 friendly games to execute this and trial it. The first area I wanted to make sure we were getting right was that first fuel station. So straight after the warm-up, were the players actually consuming the gels? So this is another video just to show you, where you can see the warm ends. We've got various staff members, 1, 2, 3, 4 staff members, all strategically placed, giving the players a gel in the hand as they walk off. So again, it doesn't seem very spectacular, but it's the process. The players are getting familiar with the process. They bought into it that this is important. So yes, training, got confidence that it was doable. We started to execute post-warm-up gels. And then in the actual game, it was, can we actually deliver this in a high-pressure environment? So you can see this is the snapshot of the game against Canada. And this is where Rachel is. There's gels all around the pitch. And that 60th, 70th minute mark, the kind of the message to the players was, if we get an injury around this time frame, we want you to go and autonomously split off and find the gel. So lots of education beforehand. And this video demonstrates it really nicely. So England are in white against Canada. Our goalkeeper gets the ball, feels a niggle. And at that point, this is about 65 minutes or so, you start to see the players, they start to split off and go and find the nearest gel. What I like about this, the manager's involved, telling players to go and get what they need. Everyone was involved in the process. So I'm there watching this thinking, like, wow, they're actually doing it for real. So the strategy was effective at a practice level. We then had 2 more games. We trialled it again successfully versus Spain, against Denmark. So I proved it wasn't a fluke and it was doable. So we looked at the detail on paper, delivered it in training, delivered it in friendly matches, but can we deliver it at tournament? Now this was a real challenge because at this point I didn't travel with the team. So I had to, well, not so much hope, but rely on the process that we went through of getting everybody on board with this for the plan to be delivered by others during the tournament. I'm going to show you a selection of videos of how the players were executing this at each stage of the tournament. So the first game against Scotland, Again, every single game, we had gels around the pitch. I used to spend my evenings searching for gels, pausing Sky and thinking, saying to my wife, there's gels around the pitch, it's great. And the wife says, Chris, come on, I don't care, get a life. But I thought it was brilliant. And this video here against Scotland, 65 minutes, you can see the ball goes out of play. There's access to gels everywhere, and 1, 2, 3 players, 4, Ellen, who was very, very diligent, run off to get the gel. So straight away, fantastic. There's access to fuel, and the players are taking it on board. Another example during that game, apologies for this was me filming it at home, so apologies for the poor video quality. But you can see Lucy Bronze. She goes down, and she's picking the gel up. Without the gels being around the pitch in that strategic position, then Lucy wouldn't have got fuel at that time. So the access to gel means better fuel availability. And the final video from that particular game was in this 81st minute. If you look at Ellen here, bottom left, doesn't need to ask anyone for a gel because she knows where it is. She's getting fuel. At that point, we're probably under the cosh, and it's comforting to know that the players are adequately fueled during that period of time. Against Argentina, we continued the process. Gels after the warm-up, and you can see in-game gels were always blacked out, and I'll talk about that later because we didn't want to contravene any advertising rights. 65th minute, sorry, 74th minute again, another player values it, wants fuel. This wasn't happening 12 months before. But we didn't always get it right. This was against, and I still don't know to this day what happened here, this was against Argentina. And if you watch, I'm going to pause this in a moment. One of the Argentinian players actually has a gel, one of our gels in her hand, waving it to the referee. I'm thinking, what is going on here? Then Jill says, that's our gel. Ref won't give it her back. Pandemonium. And I'm thinking, right, what's happened? Has someone got injured, dropped a gel? What's going on here? You go back to it. And eventually, Beth gets a gel, chucks it to someone else. So that wasn't part of the plan, and certainly didn't plan for that. So it just goes to show that all best laid plans can sometimes go wrong. And against Cameroon, we hit a roadblock. We went to set out the gels. Ben, he was our lead physical performance coach at the time, was great at delivering this plan. FIFA stopped us putting our gels out around the pitch. I don't know why. So we had to get really creative, really proactive in what we could do. But players were still managing to take fuel. And actually, during that time, VAR became a really ally for the fueling strategy, because when there was a break, 76 minutes, we didn't need gels around the pitch because players were so tuned in and so lasered in, they would run off to take their fuel. I'll just pause that. And there's a nice video here that I filmed at home of actually the VAR review, which showing one of our substitutes straight away getting down, getting the fuel, players running over, getting it at 76 minutes. So although it wasn't exactly the plan that we mapped out on paper, it was still getting executed. This then would continue into the quarter-final against Norway, but back at base, because we were aware of the roadblock, we looked at the rules. What can we do? What can't we do if we can't put gels around the pitch? So we looked at things like bags behind the goal, using VAR, for example. Can we get creative with our water bottles and strap fuel to it? And can we just get everybody fully on board that actually, if we can't put the gels out, can we still get the gels to our players? And I put this picture in because this just demonstrates, I guess, the buy-in and the focus to this strategy is happening. This is the quarterfinal, huge game. I'm not there, but the strategy is alive and kicking. Small clip, half time. You can see, as you look keenly at Ellen's hand, gel in hand. So great to see. Moving into the semi-final, for me, this is really important. It's great doing it in training and mapping out something on paper and doing it in friendlies, but the seventh game, the semi-final, biggest game of the tournament, of what we've been involved in so far, are we still executing the plan? And you can see, yes, gels around the pitch, players taking on the fuel, and at 62 minutes, I've watched this more times than is healthy. I've zoomed right in and we are taking gels. Again, fuel being delivered to the players at a crunch time, which will help their physical output. And from a nutrition point of view, that's what we're here to do. Unfortunately, we didn't get the right result, but it wasn't for the want of trying from a nutritional perspective. Now, I've put this slide in. I take a lot of inspiration from the work that Team Sky did in the Giro d'Italia, where there's, if you ever get a chance to go on YouTube and look at this, it's where they put in a very, very detailed fueling strategy for Chris Froome and how they had fueling points at different parts of the stage. and how it was a huge team effort to deliver it. Like the science is one thing, but how are we going to deliver it? This is a great example of the logistics. I've blanked out some stuff here, but it became a core part of what we did. It was part of the preparation for the games. Team ops are involved, physios, massage therapists, security people are involved in the process. Everyone was briefed on what we had to do. We worked with Science and Sport to get blanked out gels so we wouldn't, contravene any marketing rights, for example. And the logistics were really, really big because I wasn't there either. So we had to get everyone on board to deliver it. Because I wasn't there, I would always make sure I was present on WhatsApp. So I would always put together these images and drop them the day before a game to the players' WhatsApp groups. Same message, delivered slightly differently, just to keep them aware. I've no idea if they must have been fed up with me after, ending the tournament and sending these messages. But from my point of view, it was keeping the message constant. And the day before a game, we keep the message simple. Happy Fuel Day, eat big, because this is what we're trying to achieve, be the most fueled team in the world. It's really hard sometimes to look at the performance impact and look at the data, look at GPS and correlate it to nutrition. But we had a look at the data from that semi-final at GPS, and this is one of our players. And what we're trying to say is, look, the metric of, I guess, high-speed running on that threshold here, the dotted line, were the players able to try and to maintain that in the second half during Game 7 of a tournament where there's lots of fatigue? So we had a look at that. Can players maintain a level of performance? Looked at various players, and well, from my point of view, this was one drop off there. This player got substituted, but we're trying our best to fuel high physical output for 7 games, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. That led on to us carrying out this research we've just carried out recently, and I can't show you any of the data, unfortunately, because it's unpublished and it's internal, but it's just a little tease. To help us achieve our vision of being the most nutritionally prepared nation in the world and having the most nutritionally prepared teams and individuals, we've carried out some research looking at the nutritional demands of the game, because we want to know what fuel is required to perform at the highest level. So what we've looked at here was we wanted to quantify how much energy our senior players are expending during a 10-day camp with an international fixture at the end of it or in the middle of it, how much fuel they're actually consuming, and to actually establish, is there a gap? Is there a fuel gap? We put this education in place. We want the players to fuel to a certain level because we know that helps performance. We've put some good education in place in the past, but how close are we? So we've delivered some research to help us achieve this, as I just alluded to. And what we did, we used a gold standard method of double labelled water. We administered that at the start of a training camp back in 2019, so a year old now. And we gave that double labelled water at the start of the camp. And during that period of time, we analysed every single piece of food the player would consume. So we weighed. The only way to do this was to weigh the food out. Everyone was on board, team, staff, a lot. And we weighed 365 individual meals and analysed them through dietary analysis software. Collected 207 urine samples because that's how we measured the energy expenditure from the double labelled water. And we administered 23 double labelled water samples. And unfortunately, I can't show you the data, but we want to identify the fuel gap. Are the players approaching the touchline and to kick off adequately fueled? That's what we want to know, because that what makes a difference. And we've actually identified now with our players who's ready to win and who isn't, and what actually the fuel gap is, and is there a gap? And that really helps us have rich conversations with the players. And that information that we found, we then translated it into really detailed fuel plans for the players. So every player got a breakdown of what their energy expenditure was during that particular week versus their intake. This is theoretical data just for the purpose of the presentation. We gave every single player a breakdown of that 7-day nutrition. And we translated that into fuel plans based on their preferences. So there was a carb target for -1 match day and post-match. And based on the preferences identified in the food diaries that we analysed, we put together fuel plans. And we packaged it in a really nice kind of fold-up fuel guide, because I wanted the players to really value it. And to help move us forward and evolve our practice. Remember the chalkboard I talked about? That was never an adequate practice for me, but it was a start. We've now moved that further, where we weigh every item of food, we can quantify it. It can be weighed if needs be, or there's a handy hand measure, and we use digital scoops on match day -1 for players to more accurately fuel for performance the day before a game. So the next steps now, it's really exciting where we're at. We've actually partnered up with Science in Sports as our performance partner for the Lionesses, where we're really trying to look to build on this research we did with the senior team, translate it into practice, and really help us excel and bridge the gap between expenditure and performance at major tournaments. And it's great that we're able now to carry out a PhD research piece of work on our women's game to replicate what we did with the women's team with our pathway squads, so we can truly get closer to being the most skilled nation in football. And my ambition is then to translate that over into the men's game and replicate it. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. It was lots of detail that I wasn't unable to go into in the 30 minutes, but I hope I've been able to give you an insight into the approach that I took with the team. It wasn't a perfect approach, but it was our best attempt at trying to have an impact on performance through nutrition. So I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.